Okay, thank you for all that have jumped on this link call. This is the first in a series of Azure-specific topics that build on each other. So today's topic is Intro to Azure. My name is Phil Pierman. I'm an account executive in Alaska, Montana, Idaho, and California. And with me, I have Flora Muglia, who is an Azure specialist. She's going to be conducting the Intro to Azure today. The group is small enough where we can do some Q&A, but I would ask that you put your question in the window first, and I will either answer it or Flora will answer it as it fits in the flow. If we need to get deeper into anything, we are happy to take questions offline and work with you directly for your institution. So feel free also to, I'll put both of our email information in the IM window as well, so feel free to email us directly or again put an instant message in the instant message box. Other than that, Flora, if you want to do a quick intro and then we can dive right in.
Sure, thank you so much, Phil. So hi everyone, my name is Flora Muglia. I'm an Azure specialist and covering the Northwest in education for the United States. So really happy to be on this call. Quickly, I just want to level set expectations for what this will be. This is the first in a 5-part Azure webcast series. So if you want a deep technical dive into Azure, this might not be the call for you. This is more of an exploratory call talking about what the cloud is, how you might want to think about leveraging it, what Microsoft is doing from a vision perspective. So I just want to level set that expectation because we will have some calls later on that will help with implementation, that will go over deep dives into different technical solutions like Store Simple, Active Directory, media services, backup, things like that. So as long as you know that, and I'm very happy to have you. As Phil said, please feel free to put chat or questions into the chat window. I'd love to engage and have this be as interactive as possible. And actually, as I'm kind of getting started, I'd love to hear for those who are on the call, considering we only have 9 participants, is this first taste of Azure in the cloud? What's your previous cloud experience? I'd love to just, if you could type it out, that would be great, just so I know kind of as I'm talking and can better target this to you and your perspective. So without further ado, I will get started. So what is Microsoft Azure? Azure is an open and flexible cloud platform that basically enables you to, potentially, the end goal is to migrate your entire data center to the cloud. However, we realize that that's not totally sustainable and that's not really in reach, particularly because the cloud is a really new solution and it can be really intimidating. So we've kind of developed the ability to do what we call a hybrid model where you have some things on premises, some in the cloud. But there's a lot of benefits to moving certain workloads to the cloud and really just essentially basically providing you with an experience that is always up, always on, that you only pay for what you use. You can be able to scale with data and whatnot. So that's essentially what we're looking for, and that's kind of what we offer to you in the solution. We're trying to develop something that is eventually something that you could completely run in a cloud-based environment and no longer have to maintain servers on premises in your environment. So that kind of leads into the next slide. Why consider the cloud? What is there to offer from that perspective? So I think there are 3 things we like to focus on. There's speed, scalability, and economic incentive. From a speed perspective, it's very efficient to move your data to the cloud. And I was actually just talking with a coworker today about how fast and how easy things are. So he actually, Aaron, this I guess would be for you, had been evaluating both the Google Cloud and AWS as well as Azure and had been playing around with the interface. And he said that by far Azure was the easiest to navigate. It was the most straightforward from a setup perspective. And then also when I work with my cloud solution architects to set up Azure Labs, which there's several in California coming up, so I highly recommend you taking advantage of that. But from that perspective, we'll have customers be like, wait, that's it? That's all? It's 3 hours and I know everything I need to know? And yes, that is it, because you can reuse scripts. The setup is so fast and you're really connecting to your on-premises environment. From a scalability perspective, when you're purchasing on-premises infrastructure, you really have to account for multiple years, right? So you want a server to have a life cycle of about 5 to 8 years, and you don't necessarily know, A, what your work structure is going to look like in that time frame, how much data growth you're going to have to account for. There's a lot of unknowns, and so you end up oftentimes paying significantly more because you're paying for that potential extra usage down the road. And so with Azure, you're only ever paying for what you use, and you're able to scale up and down at any given time. So you could start out with a couple terabytes of data in the cloud and easily add more, or pull it back too if it's not working for you. From a server perspective, you can monitor what a server is doing, and you can actually create an auto-scale functionality into Azure so that the second it's up at 80% capacity, it'll scale up to the next level so that you're always having the right amount of usage at any given time. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we've had multiple different sites like Forrester and whatnot say that the cost savings of the cloud is about 4 times compared to an on-premises environment. So that's accounting for the hardware itself, hardware refreshes, maintenance costs. There's a lot of things that go into extra parts, that go into maintaining a server environment. So especially when you take out all of that stuff and you're just paying for the bare bones, the functionality, that's why the cloud is saving you a lot of money. You're basically renting space, from like it's like an apartment kind of. You're renting space from Microsoft to run your system. So I also want to talk quickly about some cloud trends. So they say that by 2016, 70% of all CIOs will have embraced a cloud-first strategy. And that's definitely where we see things going. Satya Nadella, who is Microsoft's CEO, has basically said we're all in with a cloud-first, mobile-first strategy in Microsoft with Azure. So we are building data centers left, right, and center. We are investing in multiple resources internally, not only developing the services and coming out with new updates constantly, but then also from a support standpoint, people like me are here to help you learn more about the cloud and also to support you through that process. So then there's some cool statistics, and I kind of touched on a few of these in the previous slide, but I'll go into them in a little bit more detail here. So from an efficiency perspective, it is said that the things that would take 6 to 12 months to create and complete in an on-premises solution take 2 weeks with Microsoft Azure. And that is accounting for, a full data center migration, migrating multiple virtual machines, running a hybrid type of environment, doing, having servers and data and everything up and running in the cloud. So it's really efficient. And we have more than 430 billion Azure Active Directory authentications. And part of that is because, I don't know if you know this, but Office 365 users are already sitting up in Azure AD. So you'd think, well then are we just accounting for those Office 365 users? No, those are truly people who've taken advantage of the Azure Active Directory side of things. So doing things like single sign-on, password reset, customizing the web portal so it's a unified login. One of my colleagues, Kathleen, was telling a funny anecdote saying that that's actually very important because when Microsoft had set up the login site for Office 365, the colors were like blue and yellow or something. It must have been, Berkeley or something like that. And I think, then Stanford is on the call and is like, wait, no, we can't have blue and yellow. We need our own colors. We need our own customized portal for people signing in. So it becomes, a way to sort of help users feel like they have a unified experience, not only from a password standpoint, but then logging in as an individual school. And then I was talking a bit about the scalability. So one of the great features with Azure Automation is the ability to scale for site visitors. So if you've got a website, a web application that you are enabling, this is a cool statistic, but one of the case studies we had was the website was able to scale from 30,000 users to 250,000 site visitors instantly. So basically the traffic management side of things is made much easier through the cloud, and that's just a huge statistic. And that's great for things like if you have an event that you're streaming, perhaps graduation, something like that, you've got more people attending the site. You can also run analytics on stuff like that. So there's a lot of potential, and we're constantly coming out with new features. Another interesting statistic is that year-over-year database growth is at about 280%. So we have a really robust SQL database system, but you can also run other types of databases in Azure. And that's one of the things I'd also like to focus on is Azure integration with supposedly competing products is actually really good. We recently integrated full-scale VMware integration, so you can run vSphere and traditional VM. We can migrate workloads over from VMware. You can migrate workloads over from AWS. We work with Oracle and SAP, and the Oracle integration is something that really no other cloud provider at this time offers, so that's really excellent. From the economic standpoint, again, this is just kind of furthering on the side I was talking about before. One of the case studies we had was, the types of stuff that costs $100,000 on-prem is $25,000 in Azure. It's notable cost savings, and we have a lot of really great education case studies that speak to that. Everything. I think UC Davis had one is like saving $30,000 with the cloud. Marquette University was talking about their cost savings. So there's quite a bit, and they're all U.S. nationwide universities and school districts. And then a final kind of interesting statistic is more than 55% of Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft Azure. So the adoption is at a more than 50% rate. And so, if businesses are doing it, this is definitely something that we see as being plausible in the education space. So I mentioned a little bit before, but we are growing our data center presence exponentially. So when I started this job, this specific role, about a year ago, we had 17 data centers worldwide. Now we have 19, and we're currently developing 2 more in India. You'll see the green over there. So we are constantly growing. And when I say a data center, I'm not just talking about a couple of racks. I'm talking about full-fledged data centers. And that's actually more than double of any of the other cloud providers. I believe Amazon has about 9 worldwide, and Google's at like 6 maybe. So we are really increasing our data center presence, and we think it's really important. We've also developed, in addition to our standard data centers, we've developed Azure for Government data centers. That does not apply to education, unfortunately, at this point, but I think it does speak to our belief in higher levels of security for certain types of customers and our willingness to work with customers to fit their needs. So some things to note, and I think that this is really important. If you put your data within the United States, we'll never move it outside of the country. Additionally, there's actually an interesting anecdote, but it was a multinational company between the US and UK, put some of their data in our Irish data center just outside of Dublin. The transaction was completed in US dollars, and essentially, because of that, the US requested that Microsoft provide their data in a lawsuit, and we basically said no. We will not give up this company's data. We'll not just forfeit it. And so we're in this serious lawsuit with this US government because we don't want to, because our view of protecting the data is really important. Multi-AZ within regions or Azure equivalent. Aaron, could you expand on that a little bit? I'm just not sure what multi-AZ means. You can speak up too. This is a small webinar.
Aaron, I unmuted you if you actually want to just say it rather than type it.
Okay, I was just wondering, AWS has within each region, they have availability zones,
Sure.
which is that you can house their instances in one and then fail over to another availability zone within the same region. So I was just wondering if there's some sort of equivalent to that with Azure.
Sure. Yeah, our closest equivalent is our CDNs, and so it's not totally an equivalent, I guess you'd say. But we've got, in addition to the 19 data centers, we've got, I think, like an extra 50 CDNs across the globe, and those work as kind of local failovers. But you can also do redundancy across the country. And you'll notice that some regions have others closer than, So, for example, within the central region, we've got one in Iowa and just outside of Chicago. So it's still pretty regional from that perspective. But from a latency perspective, we haven't really had any complaints, regardless of wherever they are connecting from. So that's positive. Does that answer your question a little bit, Aaron? You're on mute. Yes, perfect. Excellent. So from a security standpoint, I think that this is a really important point, but it's also something, it's what you'd probably expect, but it's also, I think, really important to note. Thank you, Louis, for the Davis case study. So essentially, one thing that's really important to note is we do not data mine. So we do not have access to your data at any point. The only time we'd ever have anyone, in looking at your data is if you had a support problem and you had explicitly requested that Microsoft support come in, and even then there's a window of openness, and then I think they get shut out after like 4 hours of inactivity or something like that. So we never have access to your data, and we would never use it for email or for for advertising or anything like that. I think that can be a concern with companies like Microsoft who have Bing, search and things like that. So just want to be very explicit that we don't have access. And actually, I've got some funny stories where I've had customers say, we have this user that's been logging in and doing all this stuff. Can you tell us what they're doing? And I'm like, no, I can't see anything. There's nothing. I have no access to anything you're doing. Or I had another customer tell me that they lost the security key that they created for their storage, and I was like, I'm really sorry, but you'll have to either regenerate it and create a new key, or I'm not sure what to tell you. So I think it speaks. It's, on the one hand, it's a good thing. On the other hand, I think it can be frustrating sometimes. Unless we've got a premier support or something like that coming in. But we don't have access to your data, and I think that is the important point to make. So as I showed you before, we've got more than 20 data centers throughout the globe, and we're building more as we go. We also have an emphasis on trustworthy computing, which was kind of created as the industry standard several years ago, and I think has become kind of the constant expectation when it comes to the cloud. One of the things that I think actually really differentiates Microsoft from its competitors is its security centers. So we have oh gosh, I saved this earlier and it didn't. So we have a anti-malware, it's not showing here. Wait, I guess I could see it in the last one, what they're actually called. Malware Protection Center, Security Response Center, and Digital Crimes Unit is what they are. So the three of those combined essentially enable you to protect, like, your data is just extra protected. And the reason why is because Microsoft works with the FBI, the CIA, and then also international agencies to detect anomalous activity on the web, to detect hackers, things like that. So we can actually determine that there's a problem, from a hacking perspective long before you'd ever be able to. I was at an internal Microsoft conference several months ago, and they told us this incredibly scary statistic that most hacks go unnoticed by major corporations for 6 months before there's any evidence to the fact that they've been hacked. And obviously, when you've got student data, when you've got health records and things like that, that is absolutely terrifying. And it's not the kind of thing that we think is remotely okay. And so we have, it's a really unique differentiator for Microsoft in that we work with these companies or these organizations to help protect you before you would ever even potentially know that there was a problem. It's actually a funny story around that too. One of our customers called Microsoft and was like, I noticed this thing. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And so we looked into it and we checked with the FBI and the CIA, and we determined that it was a hack. And so we sent support engineers in, and then we actually gave Amazon a little call and we said, hey, just so you know, we think this is happening. You might want to check and make sure that your accounts are safe too. And we'd actually then helped protect them and their accounts using our security centers. So funny little anecdote, but I think that it kind of speaks to how strong the process is. We also have a really strong emphasis on security and compliance, and this is a great segue into the Azure Trust Center. If you haven't looked at it, I highly recommend you take a look. The Azure Trust Center is a site that goes through all of our security and compliance features and capabilities. But essentially, we are HIPAA BAA, FERPA, FISMA, ISO 70, and actually recently we became ISO 27018 compliant, which is an international compliance standard, and no other cloud provider has reached that level of compliance at this time. So it also just really speaks to we're constantly adding different levels of compliance to meet your needs. So we're constantly adding things, and I was actually on another kind of webinar call today, and they sort of had this as a complaint. We're constantly adding new features. How can I keep up with things? And that's one of the things. That's what we're here for. That's my job, is to keep you up to date on what's available and whatnot. But we're growing so much. I heard recently that we add a new feature in Azure every 2 days. So you look at the 2014 and then you look at today, and it's so much more from a feature perspective. And we're constantly coming up with not only new features, but also updates to the features that we have, because we want to make the solution better and better, because the end goal is really to enable something that you would feel comfortable, basically renting space from and running instead of having your on-premises data center. That's a long-term vision, and it's something that I think we can enable for the most part today, certainly more than we could have 2 years ago. But there are still things that people would, I think, would feel more comfortable running on premises rather than doing kind of a cloud only, and that's definitely something we support through our hybrid type of environment. But I think it's really interesting to note all of the kind of cloud updates and whatnot. Just we're constantly adding everything from the app service to new SQL updates and things like that too. So it's something that we take feedback and try to make it even better. So I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the call, but in case you weren't on, there are a lot of features in Azure, and I kind of equate it to walking into a supermarket. When you walk in, it can be a little bit overwhelming because, on your left you've got your vegetables, on the right you've got dairy and the frozen foods, and down the hall you've got the meat department, and in the middle you've got all the processed stuff. And basically it's kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I pick from? How do I even get started? And so it's one of those things where we like to sort of recommend taking what your on-premises pain points are and then using the cloud as an opportunity to offset those. So it's not something that you necessarily have to do all at once. It's not something that needs to fix everything. It just needs to fix whatever's not working for you. And so it can be really specific to your environment. Later calls in this webcast series will go into some of these solutions in greater detail, things like media services, Active Directory, backup, disaster recovery. And I can speak to some of that now if any of you had specific questions, but I kind of more just wanted to focus on an overview of what kind of, from a high level perspective, what you can even think about adding to the cloud. So you can migrate any type of virtual machine to Azure, whether that's already existing on AWS or VMware, or if you just have it sitting in your Hyper-V environment. You can make that migration to Azure and easily have it running from the cloud. You can also do things with web apps and web application management. So we've got pre-existing CMS platforms that you can use as a framework to scale out. You can do things with mobile device management. You might not think of that as an Azure solution. And I actually had, I was meeting with a customer out of Indiana, and he's like, why do you even have that listed? Like, why do you have mobile applications? And it's because we have a service called Intune that connects through Azure Active Directory and enables you to do mobile device and mobile application management. And it also integrates into our rights management service as well. So there's a lot of things from that perspective. There's also a really strong story around analytics. So we have, if you're familiar with the Hadoop platform, we have our own kind of instance of that running through HG Insight. You can also run SQL in Azure as a platform as a service or as infrastructure as a service, excuse me. I had a little moment there. There's a bunch from a storage perspective. We've got a blob storage offering. We actually just announced last week that we've got a blob storage premium offering that works for page blobs and can be connected to VMs. So it's kind of like similar to what I believe Amazon offers with S3. And then we also have Store Simple, which essentially is a sort of tier 2, tier 3 SAN replacement and enables you to organize your data as it moves from hot to cold and sort of replace any sort of tape system. Another little funny anecdote that one of my colleagues was telling me is he had at Harvard, actually, they had their tapes and they were taking them to a second site, and they took them on the T, which is their underground metro system, and the guy lost the tape on the T. So tapes definitely, if you're on tapes, please call me because I think Store Simple is definitely, or even just Azure Blob Storage, there's definitely a great story around archival, a great archival solution for your data. Active Directory is a great solution for integrating with identity management, managing multiple users and the applications, and also providing really strong security around those things, enabling things like multi-factor authentication. So if there's any anomalous login activity, that they have to enter a verification code in addition to everything else they're doing. There's all of this is integrated. And I think sometimes, again, like I said, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So if you've got questions, if you even think there might be a cloud story there, it never hurts to ask. So definitely engage either Phil, Louis, or myself on those questions. As far as another new innovation we're kind of focusing on, I wanted to talk about if you've had any experience with Azure, whether that's been in kind of a demo type of environment or you've seen it done, you probably haven't seen this. This is the new Azure portal. And I think it just speaks to kind of our dedication to an easy interface to utilize from a management perspective. So you'll see here, not only does it show you kind of where to just a quick confirmation of the fact that all of our data centers at any given time are healthy, but it also will give you a quick view of your billing and where your status is, if there's how you're doing from your database size perspective, how many sessions you're running on a single browser, how many page views you have. So it's able to run analytics, it's able to tell you the health and status of virtual machines that you're running, traffic management, certain requests that you've got going. So basically it gives you a really easy access page, kind of in that Windows 8 type of interface that is really simple to utilize. And if we'll definitely go in the future sessions, I highly recommend you check them out, but we'll do some demos of this in the old portal as well. The old portal has a ton more of functionality, and a lot of things they'll still reference and show in the older portal because the functionality doesn't exist in this new portal yet. But this is the direction we're going, and I just wanted to show it because I think it speaks volumes about our dedication to kind of making this an easy process for you. So I'm about wrapped up. Honestly, this was kind of meant to be a high-level overview and sort of just give you a taste of what Azure can do. Again, I highly recommend if you've got integration, if you've already got it running in your environment, that you attend the later trials. We've got the next webinar is kind of I've got Azure, so now what? How do I get started with deployment? How do I get, going? What workloads are most important to me? How do I prioritize that? But I did want to focus on a couple of best practices as you're even just exploring this as a cloud platform and prospect. And I sort of said this before, consider your on-premises pain points. What do you have that could be easily improved? And use that to determine what your biggest cloud priority is and your cloud vision. And then if you've got Office 365, then there's no reason not to connect your users to Azure Active Directory. They're already sitting up in Azure AD, so why not just use DirSync, or actually it's now been made so easy with the Azure Active Directory Connect tool, which is like a wizard that does the pre-configuration of DirSync and all that jazz for you. And then you have them sitting up in Active Directory. You can do things like single sign-on. Like, why not take advantage of that if it's available for you? We do have a free 30-day trial that you can take advantage of. If you go to azure.microsoft.com, you can't miss it. It's up in the right-hand corner. But if you have an MSDN subscription, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the Azure in that. It's one of those things that I don't think people know about. If they have MSDN, they typically will use it for Visual Studio or for Dev, for Office, or things like that. But you actually get $150 of Azure per month in Visual Studio. Oh, I'm sorry, in MSDN. So definitely worth taking advantage of, though I wouldn't recommend it as a production environment. That's a sandbox type of thing, because after you use up the $150, it does run out of money. And then I'd say move things over slowly and not all at once. This is the type of thing you want to kind of make sure you feel comfortable with. So start with 1 or 2 workloads and then sort of see where it goes from there. I think that there's a lot of cloud potential, but it just comes with feeling comfortable with that migration and B, kind of the setup process and whatnot. So with that, I think I'm about finished, but are there any questions I can answer? Feel free to take yourselves off mute or to put them into the chat window. Louis and Phil, while we're potentially waiting for, is there anything you wanted to add from, an account perspective, or anything that we want to kind of promote for the next workshops or anything like that?
think you covered it pretty well, Flora. Like I had said, these do build on each other. So by all means, if you have a chance, please attend the next workshops. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with dates and times for the next workshops and some follow-up materials that you guys can sort of add to your arsenal. Also, feel free to pass this on and these invites on to other folks in your organizations. The other piece I will say is we will be posting these recordings up, so they will be available all the time, 24/7. So you can also spread the word for the folks that can't make the ongoing presentations.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Flora. And if you guys do have any questions, I'm just going to put my email address in the chat window. Like I said, we will be sending out a follow-up email after over the next day or so.
I put mine in as well if you have it. It's just FMUGLIA at Microsoft.com. And please feel free to reach out. We're here as resources for you, and it's definitely something that, we want to be engaging with you in this conversation. With the MSDN, an account is that $150 per month or one time per month for however long you have MSDN for. So MSDN is an annual subscription. So if you have it for the year, it'll be for as long as you have or that you're renewing MSDN. Sure thing, Matt. All right. Any other questions I can answer? I can answer workload-specific questions if you've got to. This was meant to be more high level, but I can do deeper dives if there are any specific questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple minutes on Flora's calendar, so take advantage of her while we got her. And if not, again, we can take these offline for some specific questions for sure.
Certainly. Well, I can assume that the silence is golden. Maybe it's all so easy. So yeah, but if anything comes up, even if not now, I do promise I don't bite. But if you think of anything later in your sleep and you wake up and you're like, oh gosh, I was wondering about that, you do have my email, so feel free to reach out, and we can always set up a call or just correspond online. So happy to do that.
Absolutely, and as Flora stated in the initial part of the call, this is definitely a focus for Microsoft. This is the direction we're moving in, and in the many states that I've worked in, I've seen the conversation going from why the cloud to when and how are we moving to the cloud. So that's really why we're trying to beef up our resources for you guys and kind of help make it easy for you. So again, any questions, any concerns, anything you need clarification on, do not hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. Okay, beyond that, I want to thank Flora and Louis for attending, and then also all the attendees. We will send out a link for the recording, so you can send it out to the other folks that you think might benefit from the presentation. And stay tuned for upcoming dates and times for the next in the series.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time today.
All right, guys. Thank you. Everybody have a great day.